All right, first, there are many types of radios that support the many types of radio bands that are allowed by the FCC, specifically for the amateur radio operators. There are also many manufacturers that make available to licensed hams large varieties of models from less expensive to several $1,000s for the high-end state-of-the-art radios. Most radios I use range from around $100 to about $800. In fact, what I am going to show you is really a long time accumulation of radios over a 40-year period. I buy, I sell, I trade online or at Hamfest, also known as radio swap meets. The radios that I have assembled meets my needs, but yet did not spend a fortune. Cost, again, distributed over many years. You will see old and new, plus any electronic accessories from my electronic skills that I have learned over time. Many of these accessories are homemade that I designed and built, making radio operation more enjoyable and to help be better prepared for any emergency radio traffic when the time comes. And yes, that time will come. Before we get going, let's go over my studio office within the Radio Shack that can interface with my radios for broadcast enhanced audio to recording of all radio traffic for documenting at a later date. This also includes where I do my podcasts. The power sources for the equipment, some run off of the common house current 110 volt AC, some are 12 volt DC car voltage, and some are capable of both. So I use a solar battery backup with power inverter and an emergency generator able to switch when necessary from one power source to another immediately with one selector switch. This assures as best as possible a constant supply of electrical power regardless of day or night, winter or summer. Noting I did my best with EMP proofing within my budget to protect all of this equipment, surge suppressors, lightning arresters, and placing ferrite coils on every wire that connects in and out of my equipment, including the computers. There is no assurances when it comes to EMPs, whether from solar flares, atomic weapons, or directed energy weapons, but I did my best with what I could afford. You know, the military spends millions of dollars for protection, and they still fail. Also note that when the antennas or the radios are not in service, that in the selector switch, they all go to ground. So if there's any lightning strikes or EMP, hopefully it goes to ground. All right, moving on to my station. All right, we'll start with local communications of VHF and UHF, also in the amateur bands known as 2 meter or 70 centimeter, all next to the public service bands like fire and police, including commercial. Most is FM, but DMR in many forms is available and is heavily used today by amateurs as well as police and fire. So I have the standard DMR format, but I also have Yaesu format of C4FM, which also connects to the internet, which makes it capable of going through the internet to another radio in another country, talking to amateurs that I would normally not reach with local communications. I know that this can sound complicated, but it really isn't. Once you get to know the modes of operation, it's simple. But for now, we'll just keep it simple. Now, along with digital, of course, is the standard analog FM. That is what I mostly use on a common basis. So analog FM is most likely going to be the most common mode of operation during emergency communications. Now, for the non-amateurs, there's also GMRS, which is General Mobile Radio Service, or FRS, Family Service Radio. Though you do need a license, there's no test required. I think it runs about $35 through the FCC, and I would suggest that those listening that are interested in emergency communications that are probably not going to get their amateur radio license, that the GRMS is your best bet. This is also common with handheld radios that you'll find in Walmart or Big Five or any of the big box stores, including Amazon. Now, keep in mind that the GMRS is all for local communications, so that makes it perfect for a small community. Now, the FRS does not require a license, but it is low power. And so to upgrade to a GMRS, you'll probably get somewhere between 10 to 30 miles. And if there's a repeater system available, then you'll go from 50 to 60 mile range. That includes going around a mountain via over the mountain through the repeater. And there are handheld base and mobile radios available for a very affordable price. So the GMRS and the FRS is probably your best bet to give the average person both portability, mobile, and base communications during disasters. But note that these are becoming very popular, and the channels that operate are probably going to become very busy during emergencies. So regardless of this fact, some communication ability during emergencies is better than none. All right, getting back to the amateur radio bands, VHF or UHF, when it comes to channels, the 2-meter band alone has 800 capabilities. But note that there are band plan agreements with the ARRL and the FCC. These plans separate the frequencies into particular operations. There are some that are set aside strictly for emergency communications or just daily use or repeater use. And of course, digital has slipped in there as well. Now, if you are interested in getting your amateur radio license, the first one is known as Tech. Things have changed over the years where my first license was novice and I was only allowed to send Morse code. So there's been great changes over the years. Now, with Tech license, you have both VHF and UHF and other abilities, opening up to a whole new world of communication. And of course, the Tech license, along with the others, have rules and regulations. This is to keep an order, to maintain order for emergency radio traffic when necessary. So for myself, I have VHF, UHF, FM, C4 FM, and DMR, plus the FRS, GRMS radios in all of my vehicles here in the shack as well. This also includes handhelds ready to go at any moment. Now that I know that CB radio is really not popular anymore, especially for those that are licensed amateur radio operators, but CB still has a place when it comes to emergency communications. And so I've made an effort to make sure that I have available to me, including in the shack, a CB radio in case somebody is in need that only has a CB radio. So regardless of your personal preference, whether an amateur radio operator or not, all of these radios are tools to be used for emergencies, as well as recreational use. Okay, moving on to HF or high frequency, also known as shortwave radio. This is known to communicate easily from state to state and on certain atmospheric conditions to other countries. I have in the shack my uncle's radio, WB3CVB, that was his call. Unfortunately, he has passed away. He's now known as a silent key. I secured these radios years ago, and I use them quite often. The main HF radio is a Yaesu FT901DM and its antenna tuner with matching speaker, which is also a phone patch, having the capability to transceive through the phone lines. This method was typical in the old days, long before cell phones. This radio was called a hybrid because it used both old tube technology and state-of-the-art transistors of the time. Easily puts out 100 plus watts. Now, I also, from my uncle, received as power amplifier an old Heathkit SB220 that takes that 100 watts and turns it into a full legal power of 1500 watts PEP. Now, as a complement to my HF radios, I also have in operation a new up-to-date Yaesu FT801 that is capable of operating all modes, plus digital input and outputs interfacing with my shack computer, giving me many options in which to operate, plus the control ability from my computer to operate this radio. Note the small control head. In reality, all the works are in a box underneath the table. Now, with all these radios, if the need to operate more than one arises, like during an emergency, more than one operator can operate these radios side by side. I put together a control console which connects all the VHF, UHF, FM, digital, DMR, and even the CB radio to one control central point. This also includes both shortwave radios. With so many radios in operation means several different microphones. This can get confusing, so bringing all radios to one central point also means one microphone capable of switching to all radios when necessary, but also having the ability for the original microphones of the radios at one side in case a second operator needs to make contact. I built this console this time last year from the ground up, and one of the other reasons that I did this with the simplification of all the radios, it helps my wife operate them without the confusion. So I named it after her, the Trish box. Now, to help know and understand which radio you're operating, I use a color code system. This also translates onto the console with different colored lights. So red for CB, blue for FRS GRMS, yellow for VHF UHF DMR, green for UHF VHF analog or C4FM, and white for HF1 and HF2. So with a rotary switch, I can bring one radio in, take another radio out, or have all radios come through at one time to be operated either by a foot switch or by the front panel switch when I want to transmit. This console project turned out to be bigger than I anticipated, but I did manage to finish it. I was housebound last winter due to the snow and needed something to do. Now, the audio out of all of these radios goes through a primary mixer board, which then feeds into my main computer for documentation. But I also have the ability to send it to a 1960s reel-to-reel tape player. This is just for nostalgic purposes. But of course, having the ability to record the communication, that in an emergency communication, then there's documentation or the reference to go back and to know exactly what's been said, or any particular information that needs to be recalled in case of loss of life. And of course, with any Radio Shack, the ability to scan and monitor all types of frequencies, which include public service, government, military, and any other radio in full time, to be able to record them at a later date, to me, is priceless. Now, this also includes spectrum analyzers, full band monitoring, as well as microwave. Also, full-time monitoring of aircraft, so you can see that recording broadcasts that in case a plane is in trouble, it's good to have that information to be recalled in case a location was not heard the first time, or just hard to make out, and having another ear to listen may mean the difference of finding someone who was lost in a plane down situation. Of course, any two-way radio is going to need an antenna, and yes, I've got lots of them on this toy hauler. I have limited them to being able to be on a road for the go in case we have to move locations. Each radio and its antenna is fully monitored with a power SWR meter. This way I can assure that my transmission is getting out and that there is no issues with the antennas. It's important to monitor the transmissions to assure that you're getting out, that someone can hear you. If there's an issue with the coax line, the antenna wire, and the antenna, or maybe a problem with the radio, that you can be aware of it and correct it and get back online. All antennas that are connected to the radio go through via a lightning arrestor. All of these arrestors are grounded to the mainframe, and there's a ground that goes from the front to the back and to the top. This is part of the assurance, or one of the methods to limit any lightning strikes or stray RF, including the possibility of a EMP detonation. Now, there's so much more to show and to demonstrate, but for the simplicity of time, I'm just going to limit to what we've already gone through. So, not just what you see here in this toy hauler, my Radio Shack. All my vehicles have VHF, UHF, a few of them have the HF capabilities, and scanner, analog as well as digital. And of course, my camper is fully loaded as well, that I believe will be necessary for a to-go situation. So for my next projects, I'll be venturing into amateur radio satellite, which will also includes EME, Earth, Moon, Earth communication. So if I get this in time and able to finish it to do a video, I will post that as well. Anyways, thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, there's plenty of YouTube videos out there to demonstrate in detail everything that we have discussed. 73 from KF7 ZDT.